I never thought the day would come when I would walk into my own daughter's home and feel like an intruder. But life has a way of breaking your heart when you least expect it. It was a warm Sunday afternoon, and I had been invited, well, more like reminded, that I should attend the small family brunch at her place. My daughter, Clara, had moved into the house I bought for her as a wedding gift. I told myself it was a blessing, that she deserved stability after marriage, that it was my duty as a mother. But deep down, I had always known gifts like that sometimes come back to wound you. I quietly opened the side gate into the backyard. The voices carried louder than I thought they would. I stopped just a few steps in when I heard Clara's voice. She's just a burden now. I can't keep dealing with her anymore. My heart froze. My own daughter. Then, her husband's voice, dripping with agreement, followed. Exactly. She doesn't even realize how much she drains us. I don't want her living here. I'm done. The plate of cookies I had baked with my old tired hands nearly slipped from my grasp. For a moment, I thought maybe I had misheard. Maybe they were talking about someone else. But no, they meant me. I stood there, trembling, clutching the plate like it was the last piece of my dignity. I finally stepped forward, clearing my throat. My voice was low, cracked but steady. Is that really what you think of me, Clara? The backyard fell into dead silence. Clara's eyes widened, her mouth parting like she had been caught in a crime. Her husband, Thomas, stiffened, but didn't look ashamed. No, he looked irritated. Mom, Clara started, but I held up my hand. No, I want to hear it from you. I'm a burden. After everything? Her face twisted in frustration, the kind of frustration that hides guilt, but speaks louder than words. You don't understand, Mum. We need space. You've been hovering. It's too much hovering? I laughed bitterly, the sound more painful than tears. I gave you this roof over your head, Clara. I gave you everything I had left. And now I'm too much? Thomas finally chimed in, his voice cold. She's right. You should have thought about your own future instead of depending on us. We're trying to start a family, and frankly, we don't need another responsibility. His words cut deeper than a knife. Responsibility. As if I was some stray animal they had been forced to feed. I felt the tears sting my eyes, but I swallowed them down. My pride wouldn't let them see me break. You think I need you, I whispered, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. You think I've got nothing without this place. They both stared at me, maybe expecting me to beg, maybe expecting me to apologize, but instead, something inside me shifted. It was like an old wound that had healed wrong suddenly cracked open, reminding me of something they had no idea about. I set the plate of cookies down on the garden table, slowly and carefully, like I was placing down a piece of my old life. My hands stopped trembling, my back straightened. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of my silence breaking. I turned to Clara, locking eyes with her. My voice was calm, almost too calm. You think I'm just a burden, but Clara, there are things you don't know. Things about me, about what I've kept hidden all these years. Her lips parted. What are you talking about? I smiled faintly, not out of joy, but out of something darker, stronger. You'll see soon enough. Just remember this moment, Clara, because everything is about to change. And without another word, I walked out of the backyard, leaving her and Thomas standing in stunned silence. I didn't cry. Not then, because the secret I carried was bigger than their betrayal. And soon, they would understand just how wrong they were to underestimate me. When I walked out of Clara's backyard that day, I didn't go straight home. My feet carried me without my permission, wandering through streets I hadn't visited in years. The world looked the same, but something inside me had shifted forever. Her words, "She's just a burden," echoed louder than any scream could, but instead of breaking me, they awakened something I had buried for decades. Because the truth was, I wasn't just an old mother who had given her daughter everything. I was someone who had survived storms Clara knew nothing about. Someone who had built, lost, and hidden more than anyone in that house could ever imagine. When Clara was little, I worked 3 jobs: mornings in a factory, afternoons at a diner, nights cleaning offices. Her father, Richard, wasn't much help, always chasing dreams that never paid bills. He'd gamble away what little we had, promising he'd make it big one day. That day never came. I stayed for Clara's sake. I wanted her to have a father, even if he was a disappointment. But when he finally walked out on us one cold December night, I wasn't surprised. I was relieved. What Clara never knew was that before he left, I had already started something of my own. Something that would later save me in ways she couldn't imagine. At the diner where I waited tables, a kind old man named Mr. Whitaker used to sit at booth 3 every Thursday. He noticed my exhaustion, the bags under my eyes, the way I rushed from one shift to another. One evening, he slid a book across the table when I brought him his coffee. "You've got a sharp mind, Evelyn," he said. "Don't waste it on just surviving. Learn this." It was a book about real estate investment. I laughed back then. What business did I have with real estate? I could barely pay rent. But Mr. Whitaker insisted. Week after week, he taught me small lessons. How to read property value, how to spot a bad deal, how to negotiate. I listened, I learned, and slowly I began saving. Every tip at the diner, every extra dollar from cleaning late-night offices, I stashed it away. And by the time Clara was in middle school, I made my first investment, a small broken-down duplex. I didn't tell anyone, not Clara, not her father, not even friends. People can be greedy, and secrets are safest when kept close to the chest. But here's the thing about sacrifices: children don't always see them. Clara grew up thinking I was just a tired, nagging mother who never had time for her. She didn't know I spent sleepless nights studying contracts after putting her to bed. She didn't know that the roof over her head, the clothes on her back, and the tuition she cried over when she didn't get her way, all came from my hidden hustle. By the time she went to college, I owned 3 properties. By her wedding, I owned 5. And when I handed her the keys to the house she now lived in with Thomas, she thought it was all I had. She was wrong. I wasn't alone in this journey. There was Lydia, my neighbor from the old apartment days. She watched Clara while I worked double shifts, never asking for much in return except kindness. She became like a sister to me, someone who reminded me I wasn't completely alone. Then there was Daniel, my lawyer, sharp, loyal, discreet. I had hired him quietly when I started signing bigger contracts. He knew my assets, my trusts, my accounts, all hidden in places Clara never suspected. Daniel always said the same thing. "You're smart to keep this private, Evelyn. People, especially family, can change when they smell money." Back then, I thought he was being cynical. Now, standing outside Clara's backyard, his words rang like prophecy. For years, Clara thought I was average. She thought I had scraped by, barely making ends meet, and that gifting her a house was the last card I had to play. I let her believe it, because what kind of mother corrects her child when they assume she's weak? But when she called me a burden, when she let Thomas spit those cruel words into the air, I realized something chilling. They had already decided my worth, and nothing I gave them would ever change it. I wasn't a mother to them anymore. I was a liability, and that's when I knew It was time to remind them who I really was. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, pulling out old files, bank statements, deeds I hadn't touched in years. My fingers trembled, not from weakness, but from the storm building inside me. I picked up the phone and dialed Daniel. "It's time," I whispered. There was a pause on the line. Then his calm, steady voice replied, "Are you sure, Evelyn? Once we start, there's no going back." I looked out the window at the dark, empty street, my daughter's words still echoing in my ears. "She thinks I'm a burden," I said. "It's time she learns the truth." And as I hung up, I knew everything was about to change. The next morning, I didn't wake up as the same fragile woman my daughter thought I was. I woke up as Evelyn, the woman who had built, fought, and hidden empires while raising a child alone. I had one goal: to face Clara and Thomas not as a burden, but as the storm they never saw coming. I didn't go to their house unannounced. No, that would have been too easy. Instead, I sent a polite message to Clara. "I'd like to come for dinner tonight. I think we need to talk," she replied hours later. "Fine. Thomas's parents will be here too, so behave. Behave." The word made me laugh. Tonight, they would see just how much their burden could misbehave. Before leaving, I called Daniel. "Bring the folder," I said, "and be ready." When I entered Clara's house, the atmosphere was already heavy. Thomas's parents sat stiffly at the table, dressed as though for an important meeting. Thomas wore a smug grin, and Clara barely looked at me. "Mother," she said flatly, "you're late." "Age does that," I replied calmly, taking my seat. "But don't worry, I'll make up for lost time." The first half hour was small talk, but the air buzzed with tension. Thomas boasted about his business plans. Clara kept dropping hints about how hard it was to support an aging parent. Finally, I set my fork down and looked around the table. "I came here tonight," I said, my voice steady, "because something needs to be cleared up." Once and for all, Thomas leaned back in his chair. "Oh, this should be good." I turned to Clara. "Yesterday, I overheard you in the backyard. You said I was just a burden. Do you deny it?" Her face turned pale, but she quickly recovered. "Mother, you misheard. I was just stressed." "Don't lie to me, Clara." I heard every word. The room fell silent. Even Thomas's parents shifted uncomfortably. Thomas chuckled. "Well, if we're being honest, Evelyn, you are kind of extra weight. Clara and I are building our future. We can't afford to drag the past with us." Drag the past. I let the words hang in the air before smiling, a smile that unsettled them. "Interesting," I said, "because the past is exactly what I came here to talk about." Daniel, who had been waiting quietly in the corner, stood up and placed a thick folder on the table. "What is this?" Clara asked nervously. "Records," I replied. "Proof, receipts, deeds." I opened the folder, pulling out the first paper. "This," I said, sliding it across the table, "is the deed to this very house. Purchased by me, not Thomas, not you." "Me," Clara blinked, confused. "You gave it to us as a gift." "I let you live in it," I corrected, "but don't mistake generosity for weakness. Legally, it has always been mine." Gasps filled the room. Thomas's mother pressed a hand to her chest. I pulled out more papers, property deeds, bank statements, trust accounts. One by one, I laid them out. This duplex, this apartment building, this farmland, all mine, all hidden. While you thought I was scraping by, I was building a fortune, quietly, smartly, alone. Clara's lips trembled. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because," I said coldly, "I didn't want money to define our relationship. I wanted love, respect, and instead, you gave me neither." Thomas slammed his hand on the table. "So what? You're rich? That doesn't change the fact that you're old. You'll still need us. Eventually, I looked him dead in the eye. No, I'll never need you. Daniel then opened another file. Perhaps you should also know, he said, addressing the table, that Thomas has been misusing Clara's trust funds, large withdrawals, gambling debts. Clara whipped her head toward her husband. What? Thomas stuttered. That's not true. Daniel slid over the evidence. Bank statements, casino receipts. Clara's face drained of color. You told me we couldn't afford to help, Mother, she shouted. And all this time you were... Thomas cut her off, raising his voice. Don't turn this on me. She's the one who's been hiding millions. I leaned forward. Yes, I hid it, to protect it from greedy hands like yours. The room erupted, Clara crying, Thomas shouting, his parents whispering furiously, and me, calm, collected, watching years of deception unravel in front of me. Finally, I raised my hand. Enough. The silence that followed was deafening. You wanted me to be your burden? To sit quietly in a corner while you mocked me, stole from me, discarded me. Tonight, you will see the truth. Tonight, I take everything back. I stood, gathering the papers. As of this moment, Clara, the house is no longer yours to live in. You and Thomas will leave by the end of the month. And Thomas, consider this your final warning. If you try to touch another dollar that isn't yours, I'll see you in court. Clara sobbed. Mother, please, don't do this. I was wrong, I was stressed. I didn't mean it. I paused at the door, my back to her. You didn't just say it, Clara. You believed it, and that is something I can't forgive. Then Daniel handed me one last envelope. I placed it on the table. This, I said, is my will. Updated. Everything I own, every property, every account, will no longer pass to you. Instead, it will go to someone who knows the value of love over greed. Gasps filled the room again. Clara froze, her tears drying instantly. Who? She whispered. I turned, my eyes burning with both pain and power. To Lydia's granddaughter, I said softly. The child who has shown me more kindness in her little hands than you ever did in your whole life. The room shattered into silence, and with that, I walked out, leaving my daughter to choke on the truth she never thought she'd hear. When I left Clara's house that night, I thought the storm had passed. But storms don't end in silence. They gather strength, and by the end of the week, everything exploded in a way even Clara and Thomas couldn't have imagined. Sunday morning, the town's community hall buzzed with chatter. It wasn't unusual for our town to host gatherings, but this one was different. Daniel had quietly arranged it. Neighbors, friends, extended relatives, even the church members were invited. The official excuse: a community appreciation dinner. The real reason: to finally strip away the mask my daughter and son-in-law had been wearing for years. I entered the hall slowly, cane in hand, dressed in my best blue dress. I could feel the whispers ripple through the crowd. People weren't used to seeing me this way. Calm, regal, in control. Clara and Thomas arrived moments later, holding hands, pretending everything was fine, but the tightness around Clara's smile gave her away. When everyone was seated, Daniel stepped onto the small stage. His voice was steady, commanding attention. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, we gather not just to appreciate this community, but to confront the truth that's been hidden for too long. Clara stiffened beside me. What is this, Mother? What have you done? I didn't answer. Not yet. Daniel continued. Many of you know Evelyn Harper as a quiet, kind woman who's lived modestly all these years. But what you don't know is the sacrifice and betrayal she has endured. Gasps. Heads turned toward me. Clara's face flushed red. This is ridiculous, Thomas barked. Why are we making her into some kind of saint? That's when Daniel opened the projector file and displayed documents for everyone to see. Property deeds, financial records, evidence of Thomas's gambling debts. The room went dead silent. Clara's voice cracked, desperate. "Mother, please stop this." I finally stood, my voice shaking but strong. "No, Clara. For years I stayed silent. For years I gave you everything. Love, shelter, sacrifice. And in return, you called me a burden. You mocked me. You lied to everyone here about supporting me, while I was the one carrying you all along." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some gasped. Some covered their mouths in shock. Thomas jumped up, furious. "This is slander." "Evelyn is just bitter." Daniel cut him off, dropping a bombshell. "Thomas, would you like me to read aloud the emails you sent to your gambling contacts? Or should I explain how you emptied Clara's trust funds behind her back?" The hall shook with whispers. Someone shouted, "Is this true?" Clara stared at Thomas, horror dawning on her face. You told me we couldn't afford to help Mother, and all along." Thomas stammered, "I did it for us. For our future." The crowd booed. At that moment, another figure stepped forward, a local attorney I had hired months ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said clearly, "I'm here to confirm that Mrs. Harper has legally reclaimed ownership of all her assets. This house, the lands, the accounts, they are hers alone. Furthermore, steps are being taken to ensure Mr. Thomas Harper faces consequences for his financial misconduct." A loud gasp swept the hall. Thomas went pale. You can't do this." "Oh, but I can," I said quietly. "And I have." Clara suddenly fell to her knees before me. "Mother, please, don't do this. I was wrong. I was ungrateful. Her sobs filled the hall. People whispered sympathetically, but no one moved to help her. They had heard her cruelty. They had seen the evidence. I looked down at her, my heart heavy. "Clara, forgiveness isn't words. Forgiveness is change, and I have yet to see you change." Her cries echoed, but I turned away. The attorney continued, effective immediately. "Thomas and Clara are being removed from the Harper estate. Legal eviction papers have already been filed. Additionally, law enforcement is reviewing Thomas's financial activities for fraud and embezzlement." The crowd gasped again. A few clapped, others shook their heads in disbelief. Thomas exploded. "You can't do this. You're destroying us." I turned back to him, my voice cutting through the noise. "No, Thomas, you destroyed yourself." People began standing, clapping, whispering words of support. Some hugged me, others shook their heads at Clara and Thomas in disgust. "After everything she gave them," one woman muttered. "Ungrateful," another whispered. The humiliation Clara and Thomas felt was visible. Faces red, eyes darting, hands trembling. For once, the mask was gone. As the crowd dispersed, I stood alone at the edge of the hall. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "The truth is finally out." I nodded, but inside my heart was heavy. I had won, yes, but victories built on broken families never feel whole. Clara had once been my little girl, the child who held my hand on the way to school, the one who made me promise never to leave her side. And now she looked at me like a stranger. Was justice worth the cost of losing her forever? As I left the hall, the applause of the crowd still ringing in my ears, one thought lingered like a shadow. Had I truly freed myself from being a burden, or had I just traded one kind of loneliness for another? Justice is delivered publicly. Clara and Thomas are humiliated and legally cut off, and Thomas faces possible legal action. But Evelyn's heart aches with one unresolved question. Can a mother ever truly let go of her child, even after betrayal? It has been 2 years since that night in the community hall, the night when the truth could no longer be hidden, the night when masks fell and consequences became unavoidable. People often ask me if I regret it, if standing up, exposing everything and reclaiming what was mine left me with peace or with emptiness. The truth is, it left me with both. Clara and Thomas were forced out of the house within weeks of that gathering. The eviction notice was swift and final. For the first time in my life, I closed the door on my own daughter. The neighborhood buzzed for months afterward. Some people pitied Clara, whispering that perhaps I had been too harsh. Others quietly applauded, saying they wished they had the courage to do the same with their ungrateful children. But in the quiet hours of night, when the world went still, my heart wrestled with guilt. A mother doesn't stop loving, no matter how deep the betrayal runs. There were nights when I stared at old photographs. Clara as a child with scraped knees, Clara in her prom dress, Clara holding her newborn son for the first time. And I would wonder, when did we lose each other? Was there a single moment or 1,000 tiny cracks that I ignored until the whole bond shattered? Within 6 months, Thomas was arrested for fraud and gambling-related crimes. The newspapers carried the story. Local man faces charges for embezzlement and debt scandal. It should have felt like justice, but watching him being led away in handcuffs only deepened my sorrow. Because even though he had wronged me, he was still the man my daughter loved, the father of my grandson. Clara visited him during the trial, but soon she stopped. From what I heard, their marriage couldn't survive the weight of exposure and disgrace. Clara herself disappeared from my life almost entirely. At first, she sent me letters, angry ones, begging ones, sometimes both in the same envelope. She accused me of ruining her life, then in the same breath asked for forgiveness. But when I replied, telling her that forgiveness was possible, but trust would need rebuilding through actions, she stopped writing altogether. I haven't seen her face in nearly a year. The silence is heavy, but it is also healing. In the emptiness Clara left behind, something unexpected grew. Community. The same neighbors who once gossiped about my situation began turning to me for advice. Older women who had quietly suffered financial or emotional abuse within their families came knocking at my door. "Evelyn," one whispered, "I saw how you stood tall. I want to learn how to do the same." That's when I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been silenced, belittled, or dismissed because of age. With Daniel's help, I started small, monthly support meetings in the community center. At first, only 5 women came, then 10, then 20. Within a year, we had nearly 100 seniors attending. We called it the Phoenix Circle. Because like the Phoenix, we were rising from ashes we never thought we'd escape. Running those meetings gave me a new kind of family. We shared our stories of children who manipulated, of spouses who abandoned, of siblings who stole. But we also shared victories, buying back a stolen car, reclaiming savings, finding the courage to move into a safe space. The more I listened, the more I realized my pain was not unique. My silence had been shared by thousands. It gave me strength to keep moving forward. I also reconnected with old passions. I reopened my late husband's garden, turning the small patch of land behind my reclaimed home into a flourishing haven of roses, lavender, and vegetables. Children from the neighborhood came by to learn about planting, and soon weekends became community garden days. For the first time in years, laughter filled the air around me. Of all the unresolved wounds, one remained sharp, my grandson, Adam. When Clara and Thomas left, they took him with them. He was only 10 then, old enough to sense the tension, but too young to understand the depth of betrayal. I wondered constantly what Clara told him about me. Did she paint me as cruel? Did she erase me from his memory the way she had tried to erase my dignity? And then, one spring afternoon, it happened. I was watering the garden when a tall boy approached hesitantly. His voice cracked as he asked, "Grandma?" It was Adam, 2 years older, taller, with Thomas's eyes but Clara's smile. Tears blurred my vision as I opened my arms. He hugged me tightly, as if afraid I would vanish if he let go. "Mum doesn't talk about you," he whispered, "but I wanted to see you. I wanted to know if what I heard was true." I held his face in my hands. "What did you hear, darling?" "That you're strong," he said softly. "That you're the bravest person in town." I wept then, not from sorrow, but from the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the next generation wouldn't repeat the mistakes of the last. Looking back now, I see my journey differently. What began as humiliation in my daughter's living room ended as liberation in a community hall. What began as betrayal ended as purpose. I lost a daughter, yes, but I gained a mission. I learned that sometimes love means letting go, even of those closest to us, if they refuse to respect the bond. I learned that boundaries aren't cruelty, they're survival. And I learned that it is never too late to reclaim your dignity. To those watching my story today, I want to tell you this. You are not disposable. You are not a burden. If someone treats you like you don't matter, stand tall and remind them that your worth isn't theirs to decide. Family is not only blood, it is respect, compassion, and truth. And sometimes, the greatest act of love you can show yourself is to walk away from those who insist on hurting you. Tonight, as I sit at my desk, Adam's photo beside me and the laughter of neighbors drifting through the garden window, I feel peace. Not the peace of reconciliation, for some wounds never fully heal, but the peace of knowing I chose myself. If I could go back to that moment in my daughter's house, hearing her say, "She's just a burden," I wouldn't cry again. I would simply smile and whisper to myself, "You'll see. I am more than you ever imagined." Did this story touch your heart? What would you do if you were in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading every one of them. And if you believe dignity has no age, share this story with someone who needs courage today.